All right, well, let's get started. Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to PAVE's virtual panel number 3, Understanding the AV Perception Challenge. As you are probably aware, PAVE came out with the results of our first poll on public perceptions of AVs and advanced driver assistance systems, ADAS. There's been a bunch of media coverage, of course, about these results, and we really were hoping to get beyond sort of the very top level takeaway, although that is important and we do want to discuss it. But we've got a great panel of experts here who are ready to help us understand sort of some of those deeper lessons in the polling data. First, we have Kelly Nantel, PAVE's Vice Chair and the Vice President of Communications and Advocacy at the National Safety Council. Kelly, welcome.
Thanks, Ed.
We also have Kent Kaiser. He's a Public Policy Fellow at United Spinal Association. Kent, welcome.
Thank you.
And we have Nina Chi. She is the Chief Operating Officer of Voyage, which is a company, an autonomous vehicle company that is a member of PAVE. Nina, welcome.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So I want to start with you, Kelly, and just sort of, what was your most important data point or takeaway from this poll?
Thanks. You know, Ed, I think the poll has a ton of really rich data, really interesting data for us to dive into. But for me, the real big takeaway was the correlation between the attitudes that people had, you know, sort of their pessimistic attitudes, and a lack of knowledge around the technology. And I think, you know, there's just no doubt that exposure to AVs and education about AVs and technology is really critical in order. This is my dog, so I'm sorry, I'm going to shut my door in a second. But is really critical to sort of moving forward on this effort. And I don't think you can overstate the importance of both consumer education and giving people experience, a sneak peek, a better, deeper understanding of the technology. And so for me, it was really gratifying to see that bear out, you know, in the survey results, that you had so many of the people who we polled who said, if I understood it more, or if I was exposed to it more, I think I'd have more comfort in it. And that's exactly why PAVE was formed. And I think, you know, all of us in this industry recognize that that's a real need.
Absolutely. Nina, so that's kind of relevant to your role here. You know, you're one of the AV companies that have really put a lot of sort of butts in seats, so to speak. And so you've seen firsthand what that personal exposure can do. In your experience, you know, has that experience of people, you know, first-time riders, sort of their attitudes changing, is that something that you see in real life happening as well?
Yes, absolutely. So there's definitely a lot more we can do in terms of general education, in terms of helping people understand how AVs work, you know, what the sensors do, what the computer do, how the brain of the car works. But one of the most impactful things that we've seen has just been providing people with rides and basically showing as opposed to telling. So one of the initiatives that we do at one of our communities in San Jose called the Villages Golf and Country Club is that we have these events, what we call them try-a-rides, which is basically we invite the entire community to come out and just experience what a self-driving car looks like, feels like, and just take a ride and see what, you know, what it can do. And it really prompts a lot of conversations in terms of just what their expectations was, what it actually performed, you know, how it can evolve in the future, and just a better understanding of what the car is capable of. And from there, then you can really generate conversations about specific use cases, why they would use a self-driving vehicle, you know, whether it's mobility challenges, the fact that they're no longer comfortable driving, you know, it's a retirement community, so they're partying and drinking a little bit, they shouldn't be driving. So lots of use cases come out of that. And then it becomes very tangible that this is not just a futuristic technology, but more of something that's a convenience and giving folks independence and just freedom in their daily lives.
Yeah, and I think one of the really interesting things about Voyage is that you are targeting elderly people, retirement communities, and if you look at the polling data, you would say that would be the worst possible audience to go after, because consistently on almost every question, that 65 plus age demographic is the most resistant to this stuff. But what you're saying, it seems to be not just that they are actually more open to it than the polling suggests, but that their attitudes can change, that these are not sort of permanently held views.
Yeah, I think, the great thing about this population is also they've seen a lot of new technology, right? The birth of commercial aviation, just even cruise control and safety belts in general. So they know the benefits that technology can bring to their lives. Their biggest thing is understanding what it can do for them, not necessarily just understanding that it's a new piece of technology. So what we've noticed is if we can explain to them the value proposition of why this could benefit their lives, they're very much more embracing of the technology. So we spent a lot of time just talking about specific use cases and how we can really give them more freedom to just move around. On average, most seniors outlive their ability to drive by over 10 years. So there's definitely times where they want to move around, but they don't have the option to. In a lot of these communities, you don't have taxis. Uber and Lyft aren't necessarily options. And so you rely on friends and family, and it's very constricting in terms of what they can do with their lives. And just knowing what AV can mean for them, especially the freedom, is incredibly impactful, and it very much resonates with them. And when you kind of approach it in terms of how can we solve a problem for them, it's very much more of an open dialogue than just saying this is technology is coming and you should use it.
Yeah, so that's a great segue, Kent, to you. People with disabilities are clearly, right, one of the communities that can be most benefited by autonomous vehicle technology, and we see that a recognition of that in the poll data. So I'm wondering, so what was your takeaway from the poll? What stood out to you?
Well, first I'd say, picking up on Nina and Kelly's points, one statistic that stood out to me was this 75% who have an ADAS equipped vehicle, quote, can't wait to see what new safety features will be in my next vehicle. That's important. And another one that stood out to me was 82% of those under 34 years of age said they couldn't wait to see what new safety features will be in their next vehicle. So those two statistics alone, to me, show the optimism of future generations that this is going to be supported. AV technologies are going to advance with public support. But let me, as a senior, address some of the comments made about seniors. It wasn't that long ago that getting your driver's license was like getting your 24th set of chromosomes in your DNA. Driving in America is a second nature to us, and prying people's hands from the steering wheel is a very difficult and heavy lift. So that ought to be taken into consideration. But I do think that with education and where the rubber meets the road, showing people by example, getting them in autonomous vehicles, getting them acclimated to what it's all about, not the nuts and bolts of the technology, but experiencing the benefits, as Nina pointed out, that you can have even more freedom, more flexibility in your schedule, calling up an automated vehicle to take you home here or there if you have a bunch of groceries or you have grandkids in tow. All of these things can factor in to make it more accessible for people seniors age. So there is also an important point about the integration between aging in America and people with disabilities. I think in the next 10 years, by 2030, 24 million people more will be using wheelchairs. Our friends at AARP tell us that of people age 65 or older, 1 in 3 fall each year. So vision problems occur after 65. Hearing problems occur after 65. The merging of the graying of America and disabilities is going to be a tremendous need in transportation in this country, and AV can help answer that. So I think those are important points to make as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that was a bunch of really, really important points there. Kelly, so we've heard already a couple of times this theme of showing and not just telling. And Kent also brought up a really interesting point about ADAS and about the role that that plays in sort of attitudes towards autonomous vehicles. And this is kind of a fraught subject because there are concerns about blurring the lines between ADAS and autonomy.
Right.
Sort of what are your thoughts sort of coming away from these poll results about the role that ADAS can play in terms of getting people comfortable with automated driving technology sort of broadly, but also maybe some of the concerns or risks that are there as well?
Well, I think we have to get beyond the concern about blurring the lines, because in the consumer's mind, it's one seamless, progression. Now we know from the technological side that's not the case, and that's fine. But for the consumer, we have to meet them where they are, and if they see ADAS technology as a building block towards building confidence in more and more automation, that's a good thing, and we have to seize on that. And I think that survey really bore that out in a way that I hope industry takes hold of and really embraces. There's always going to be the technical side of the work, and then there's just the common sense, how people think, and that's where we need to be, as an industry, if we really want to build consumer confidence. Anytime there's a major transformative innovation, this pattern of show me, don't just tell me, show me, help me understand it, that is prevalent in any kind of transformative innovation in the history of human beings, because we're creatures of habit and we like what we know and we're comfortable. And, thank God there are those people who are on the edge who do think and innovate and force us, to move. But for the vast majority of people, we like where we are. We're comfortable where we are. So you have to show me why it's in my interest. Show me how it works. Make me feel comfortable with the technology. And I really, really do believe that ADAS is a big step to helping people embrace technology as a solution, a mobility, solution, a safety solution, a sustainability solution, all of the things that ultimately AVs represent.
Yeah, and sticking with you for a sec, Kelly, because I know NSC, National Safety Council, does some really great work. You recently signed on to a nomenclature sort of standardization thing.
Yes.
You also have a program called My Car Does What, which I think is a really cool thing. Can you just explain folks sort of some of that and sort of how that plays into all this?
Sure. Yeah, no, thanks. So several years ago, we did some survey poll work ourselves, and we found that 40% of consumers who we spoke with were either startled or surprised by something that their vehicle did. And this was all related to ADAS technology. But there was very clear evidence that consumers just weren't comfortable. They didn't even know half the time what technology they had in their car. So we launched a website and a set of resources called My Car Does What. And it really is an opportunity for consumers to come to this one place to learn about how those ADAS technologies work. That's a great step in the right direction, but when you have 40 different brand names of automatic emergency braking, or 40 different technological names, people calling it different things, you're still really confusing the consumer. And so we were very excited to join AAA, Consumer Reports, and JD Power back in the fall to put together the first agreed upon set of naming definitions around ADAS technology. And, I think for us, it was a matter of trying to clear the clutter and to create some clarity and and sort of consistent definitions that we would all use and embrace as we talk about these technologies, try to create the narrative that we need to achieve so that people have an understanding. And you know, we were really happy in January, Secretary Chow endorsed those definitions, and SAE is now a part of that work as well, and they're absolutely critical. You know, many of these organizations are members of PAVE, and I think coming to this effort is an indication that we all understand we've got to speak with clarity to the consumers, and we have to start with ADAS technology so that they get accustomed to understanding how these technologies work, how they're defined, what they can expect from it, and help to grow their comfort and their trust in the technology so we can move further and further along the AV line, the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, so we at PAVE are, you know, obviously this data is really valuable to us as we think about sort of our educational efforts going forward, and who to target, and what areas to sort of address. Nina, I'm wondering sort of what maybe are some of the questions or concerns that you do get sort of as people are going through this process that you know, that you are able to sort of address for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes there's also just a question of, you know, the difference between ADAS and versus L4, L5 autonomy, and just what the car is capable of handling and what should they expect. So, you know, for people who have adaptive cruise control capabilities in their car, or AEB, you know, they think maybe that's self-driving, and that's probably something that we need to do a better job of educating the difference. So that is definitely an area that people get a lot of questions, because people own vehicles and then they think about self-driving and they kind of confound the two at times. I would say in general, a lot of it is really around safety and just about how to think about safety in a context of a self-driving vehicle. And now that you're removing a driver in the car, which historically has been the last line of defense, how does a car react to different situations, and how to think about safety in a context of no driver. So we do spend quite amount of time just explaining the various levels of safety redundancies and just things that the car is doing that goes actually above and beyond a normal driver to make sure that the car understands the environment at all times. So that's some of the areas we get. What we actually get when we start explaining more and more is more about how can this car benefit my life, right? So as we talk about providing a service within the villages, the questions then eventually transition to like, okay, I have dinner plans. How do I get the vehicle? Should I be pre-booking? Can I order it on demand? You know, what if it's an event and there's not enough vehicles? Do I have to share a vehicle with other folks that I don't know, or can I just keep the car to myself? So again, as people feel more comfortable with what the car does, then the questions become, how does this benefit my life?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that going along this showing and not just telling theme, do you think that the AV sector could do more to sort of show the benefits specifically to people with like mobility related disabilities versus just telling? Because there's been a lot of talk about it. And I think what Voyage is doing is really cool in terms of bringing this technology to the retired elderly community. Do you think that there needs to be more of that on the with that kind of outreach and showing, and not just telling with the disabled community?
And absolutely, and thanks for that question. Yeah, that's sort of the crux of the matter for the disability community, and especially for those of us who, like me, use a wheelchair, especially a power wheelchair, which is often large, oversized, and fits maybe snugly in the back of some existing vans with a ramp. It's crucial. But as Nina pointed out, some of those same qualities, safety, on demand, reliable vehicles, and accessible, are the four corners of what we need in autonomous vehicles for them to be useful to us. And as our president and CEO of United Spinal has said, James Wiseman, for millions of Americans, those four qualities in AV would be a game changer in their lives. So building a vehicle from the ground up that's truly accessible is what our greatest charge has been to automakers. That's a very difficult proposition, especially with the electrical vehicle platform, because the battery's in the base. So where do you put the ramp? But we're convinced that these engineers can and will come up with the answer to that equation to make them accessible. We just have to have the will to do it. And going back to this integration of seniors, this proliferation of disabilities, the market is going to be there. So there's no reason not to do it. One more thing, take for instance the curb cut. You know, those little ramps on corners and in downtowns, hopefully everywhere, but not enough everywhere. Those were intended to, mandated by law. When you create a new curb, you have to have a curb cut at the corner so the wheelchair users can egress the street, right? And get up and shop, dine, go to school, go to work at the buildings located on that street. Turns out, just with a lot of disability innovations, everyone benefits by that curb cut. Everyone would benefit by an accessible autonomous vehicle. Parents with strollers, travelers with luggage, delivery people with carts. Think about the possibilities, not just, you know, a passenger on their own getting in, but all the things that come with everyday life. So we hold that accessible vehicle is useful to the entire population, and the market would come built in if only that product was available.
Yeah.
One more thought. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
In the poll results, one thing you'll notice, there was one slight little anomaly, but people with mobility issues generally are about 10% more accepting of AV technologies and ADAS questions on the poll, and that runs pretty much throughout. There's a reason for that, and I think I know the reason. People with disabilities are more embracing of technology out of necessity. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? So we are accustomed to adopting new technologies because we have to. And so I think that's another important built-in supportive crowd for supporting AV in the future.
Yeah, and Nina, I want to go to you to get a little technical insight into some of the stuff that Ken was talking about. I think one of the challenges with AV perceptions is clearly that sort of the mismatch between when people thought they would be sort of on the roads in their neighborhood versus, you know, how long it's actually taking. You know, obviously you know, and I think in a lot of cases, people maybe don't understand not just how challenging developing the AV technology itself is, but then sort of as Kent alluded to, also, you know, I mean, developing a car is something that takes 4 to 5 years. And then especially when you start to combine an electrified vehicle, which is pretty relevant to AVs, and then disabled accessibility issues. Sort of talk about how combining autonomous and electrification and disabled accessibility, like how does that sort of on a technical level make the development of this stuff, you know, just take longer?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging problem, not only on the software side, but also on the hardware side. As you can tell from cars out on the road, most AV vehicles right now are retrofitted from existing vehicles, right? So you're inherently limited by what that vehicle is capable of, right? So, you know, from a seating arrangement perspective, from an accessibility perspective, it can get challenging. And the one thing that AVs need is the dual power. So having a hybrid or a full electric vehicle is very important. But like Ken said, most batteries are on the base. That makes ramps very difficult and potentially unsafe in a worst case scenario. So I'm actually quite optimistic on this front. We've seen moves from the OEMs to redesign what a vehicle in the AV world will look like, right? Maybe with a platform that raises and lowers to accommodate wheelchairs, maybe with seating that's makes more sense in a ride sharing perspective. Of course, manufacturing takes a while, so it's not anytime soon, but we are seeing good promises coming from the auto manufacturers. On the software side, look, I think humans are very good drivers, right? There's a lot of nuances of perceiving the world and understanding the world that may not is not natural for a robot. So potentially slowing down when you see a driveway because you assume maybe a car could back out. Those type of instinctive decisions that humans make, it's difficult to replicate in robots. So while from a perceiving perspective, so seeing the world, cars are more advanced, right? Because you can see 360, rain, nighttime, things like that don't affect perception. You know, the brain of the computer still needs to be trained to really understand how to interpret the situation and make judgments. So I would say that's, you know, a lot of where the challenges are coming through, and there's lots of ways to test that. I'd say in general, we do rely on simulation to test different new algorithms of how the car could behave in a real world scenario. That's especially relevant these days when it's difficult to test vehicles due to COVID-19. So we've been in the last few weeks or few months relying heavily on simulation as a first step to tune our algorithms. Even in a regular testing process, we would then migrate to a test track where we get to really push the vehicle to see what it's capable of before then we migrate to real world testing conditions where there are still safety drivers, but where we're seeing, you know, how the vehicle interacts with the real world. So lots of different steps to fine tune the algorithm. If anyone's been in a self-driving vehicle, maybe in the beginning, you would have felt the car just turning a little robotically. For instance, like if you turn right, like as a driver, you would naturally kind of move to the right and then turn right, whereas a car might make a more 45-degree turn, right? So those are things that over time we need to tweak to make it feel more like a human. And those are a lot of the challenges that, you know, self-driving vehicles are facing these days, to make sure that it embraces the full human intuition of just how you perceive the world and how you interpret the world.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned earlier, you know, the issue around safety and explaining how you prove safety, and that's also the level of, I think most people don't understand fully the level of reliability that your safety case needs to have built into it and what a challenge it is. But that's a topic that I think we should do an entire panel on at a later date. Since we're running out of time, Kelly, I wanted to go to you with our final question, which is about COVID-19 and actually about the poll itself as well. This poll was done, you know, sort of late February, early March, and obviously the world has changed a bit. We've gotten used to hearing each other's dogs and things like that, right? Lots of changes, and I'm wondering, do you think it's possible that you know, because we have seen sort of some of the AV companies come out and start to contribute to COVID-19 efforts. Do you think it is possible that even just since this poll has come out, that maybe perceptions have started to shift a little, as again, you know, to come back to this theme that we keep coming back to of showing and not telling, that AV companies are out there really showing that they can provide some real benefits to society?
You took the words right out of my mouth. It's exactly what I was going to say, which is that I think consumers are starting to see it. And so we're showing them, you know, the industry is showing them how AVs can benefit them. And there's no question the world is totally different. You know, it will be totally different when we finally emerge from all these shelter-in-place orders and people slowly start to get back to work. Maybe not, and no one really knows how everything is going to shake out. So I think that there are so many brilliant minds who've been working on this issue from the beginning. They will now look at it through a refined lens of COVID and its impact. Certainly, but I'm hopeful at least that people are seeing some of the benefits that AVs can bring through this crisis. I think I'd love to see more stories about that here in the U.S. We've seen them, you know, globally a bit more, but I'd love to see more stories in the media about that, because I think it's so important that people start. You had a great line in your Medium post, Ed. You said about going from the abstract to tangible, you know, to something where you actually see a product. And I think this is a great opportunity to show consumers how AVs can benefit them. So I'm encouraged by that for sure.
Great. Well, we are just about out of time, and I think even though we live in a world where everyone is used to Zoom calls going long, we can maybe actually end this one on time. Thank you so much to our guests. This has been a really fantastic conversation. Kelly, first of all, thank you so much for making the time. Kent Kaiser, United Spinal Association, thank you. And yeah.
Quick, can I say thank you
Please.
to PAVE? Spinal is a member, but I believe this was the first time that mobility issues in a major poll have been considered, and we thank PAVE for bringing the issue to the forefront from the disability community. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and we really appreciate all your support as a member and being here today to help highlight some of those issues. Nina Chi from Voyage as well. Thank you so much for your time today.
Of course.
And thank you all for joining us. You can find more information about the poll on our website. If you go to medium.com/@PaveTeam, there are a couple of posts that myself and Executive Director Tara Andriga have written. Please check those out. Please share them if you enjoy them. Thank you so much, and join us next week for another virtual panel discussion here at PAVE.